Throughout all of NBA history, I'm not sure we've ever seen an offensive player that requires as much game planning to counter as Steph Curry. There was a point in time where his skill set was so jarring and game-breaking that the league was left visibly clueless, and the result was some truly outlandish production as a scorer. It all starts with the outside shooting. A lot of guys are described as threats as soon as they cross half court, but Steph's the only one who could generate the same efficiency as a layup from as far out as 30 feet. I personally would argue that 2015 to 2017 was the best, most complete 3-year stretch of his career. And during that span, he made a staggering 47% of his wide open threes. That's over 1.4 points per attempt, the equivalent of a 70% two-pointer. Essentially, leaving Steph open on the three-point line was like giving up a quality shot at the rim, which completely changed the rules of defense as we know them. This especially stood out in transition. It's standard for defenses to drop back to the paint and stop the ball, then scramble to find all shooters. When Steph was playing with pace though, he would actively hunt for the ball along the perimeter, knowing that he'd be able to find slight openings to take advantage of. So like I said, the rules of transition defense changed. Instead of going inside out, against the Warriors you had to go outside in, or live with the results of an open Steph Curry jumper. There wasn't any sort of room for error either due to the speed of his shot. On this one, he's backpedaling and turning while receiving a pass, and in one motion, he's completely squared for his absurdly quick release. And the same goes for when he's the one handling the ball. If a defender doesn't pick him up as soon as he starts to approach the three-point line, he'll quickly pull up from deep off the dribble. Before Steph, pull-up threes in transition were maybe the most frowned upon shot in basketball. To many, it made no sense to not attack the paint with that open of a floor. He not only shifted the narrative on what's a good and bad shot, he turned these opportunities into a staple of his game. After all, the most iconic shot of his career was a near 40-foot pull-up in transition. When it comes to off-the-dribble shooting, we've seen some of the best over these past few years, but nobody, and I mean nobody, comes remotely close to matching the effectiveness of Steph Curry, shooting over 40% almost every year and approaching a ridiculous 45% on multiple occasions. What's so insane about these marks is that the quality of shot is usually in the dirt. A great deal of them are coming from well behind the arc. Some of them are coming with his momentum moving in an opposite direction, such as with the use of a sharp step back. Some happen while completely off balance, where you question how he even gets the shot off in the first place. And then there's of course the shots he'll take with a hand in his face, or two, because who needs to see the hoop anyways? The complete and utter audacity required to attempt some of these threes doesn't really make any sense, and would probably get a lot of players pulled from games even today. Yet he turned this into a 40% shot. There's nothing quite like going to an MLB game in the summer, especially in my great city of Chicago. The sun is beaming, there's a nice lake breeze, you're with your friends and making great memories. It's truly sports euphoria. And when I'm looking for tickets, my first stop is always Game Time, an authorized marketplace of Major League Baseball that makes the entire process so quick and easy. They feature last-minute deals that can help you save up to 60% off. You can toggle the all-in pricing feature to get an upfront total when choosing your tickets, meaning no surprise fees at checkout, and you can get a panoramic view from your seat before purchasing to ensure that you get the exact spot you want. Just looking at the Game Time app right now, I see a huge stretch of home games for the Cubs coming up in late August and early September, with tickets starting at the price of an ice cream cone. It isn't just baseball games though. Game Time has everything from concerts and comedy shows to any sport you can think of. Take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use my code HoopVenue for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code HoopVenue for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. With that said, let's take a look at how Steph's off-the-dribble three-point shooting turned him into the game's most dangerous pick-and-roll ball handler. If we graph the pick-and-roll scoring of each player during his unanimous MVP season, he didn't quite have the volume of guys like Dame or CP3, but when it came to efficiency, he was beyond an outlier, scoring considerably more points per possession than anyone who actually ran the play consistently. Defenses had never seen anything like Steph before, so in the same way he changed the rules of defense in transition, a lot of options were taken away after he came off of screens. One thing that his defender absolutely could not do was try to go under the screen. His release is too quick, and he's too accurate on those pull-up jumpers. It doesn't matter where that screen is set. This one's all the way out near the logo, Bradley goes under, and he pulls from 35 feet with perfect precision. So now that it's established that his defender has to chase him over the screen, it's on the big man to execute their coverage to perfection. And I think it goes without saying that dropping back was not an option. Remember, the league was a lot different back then, so for a lot of bigs, it was standard to hang back and drop without thinking twice. By the time Horford realizes on this one, it's too late and he actually sends him to the line for 3 free throws. As a result, it took a lot of game planning and strategizing to find a coverage against Steph in these spots, and even then there wasn't much a defense could do to take him out of his comfort zone. Some teams would try an aggressive hedge. On this one he just waits, and because his defender decided to go under, I'm pretty sure we all know what that means. Some teams would try an outright blitz in an attempt to get the ball out of his hands. And sure, that might run him off the three-point line, however, it leaves him with a ton of room to turn the corner on a drive, getting to the rim for easy points. Steph made a living out of attacking slower-footed bigs in space. Randolph is forced to come out to the three-point line to take away the jumper, but Steph gets right around him like a traffic cone on his way to a wide-open shot in the paint. While many great drivers of the basketball rely on strength or burst to consistently get into the defense, all Steph really needed was the threat of his outside shot and the right moves to weaponize that threat. Because defenders are forced to get up in his airspace from as far out as the logo, if he's able to beat them off the dribble, he's left with a huge lane to build up a head of steam as he attacks the paint. Notice how Durant doesn't give him even an inch of space from 35 feet out. From there, all it takes is a sharp change of direction to get around him and to the rim for a layup. He may not have been super explosive. He was very good at controlling his momentum to start and stop though, which when paired with the shooting, gave him one of the game's most effective hesitations. It also unlocked his ability to change directions, attacking one way, slamming the brakes and redirecting into a new lane, cutting back and forth around multiple defenders as he knifes his way to the cup. These sharp changes of direction allowed him to manipulate screens. Draymond sets this one to his left, and he sells it before crossing back to his right, with nobody else in position to stop him from getting a good look. This time the screen's gonna be set to his right. He starts a drive left, cuts to his right, only to immediately spin back to his left, creating an easy drive with just 2 sharp moves. That versatility and creativity in his handle is what truly took his driving to the next level. Anything the defense does at the point of attack, he has a counter for, and that's just a ridiculous finish through contact. We all know about Steph's most infamous highlights as a ball handler, when he made CP3 fall backwards onto the floor before hitting a baseline jumper. Or my personal favorite, when he decided to dribble through the entire team like he was playing a bunch of 5th graders before turning and hitting an absolutely stupid shot. His ball security is among the best we've ever seen, capable of handling through even the tightest quarters without picking up his dribble or turning it over, which was the final straw in making him a truly great rim attacker. Not many people talk about this aspect of his game because it's so easy to get lost in the shooting. But there was a point in time where he was getting to the rim for 4 or 5 field goal attempts a game, which is actually a really impressive mark. For reference, that 2016 number of 5.2 attempts every 75 possessions is higher than some elite slashers of today like Donovan Mitchell, Zach LaVine, and even Luka Doncic. Even more important than the act of getting downhill, though, is what Steph was capable of doing as a finisher whenever he did touch the paint. At his peak, he was capable of making over 64 to 65% of his shots at the rim, most of which were some really tough layups. What always stood out about Steph was his touch, especially with the offhand. There wasn't an angle he wasn't comfortable releasing the ball at. This unlocked so much creativity around the basket. When the defender's on his inside shoulder, he'll extend with the outside hand to avoid getting blocked. When a rim protector stands in front of him, ready to meet him with verticality, he'll speed up his release with a little teardropper. Or he'll go to what many probably remember as his go-to shot at the rim, the high arcing scoop layup. Like I said, the touch on these is just absurd. Even while off balance, fully extending his offhand and releasing from about 6 feet out, he still finds a way to bounce it off the rim and in. Strong driving and elite interior finishing to go along with the deadliest 3-ball we've ever seen would already be enough to make Steph one of the best self-creators ever. But even on plays where he got into the defense with no path to the rim, he had some nice counters. The mid-range wasn't something he was actively hunting for. However, whenever he needed to use it as a fallback option, that shooting touch took over, so it was still something the defense had to worry about. I talked about his ability to stop on a dime. That's a great way to create some separation for these 10 to 15 foot jumpers. I also talked about how he'd use his sharp change of direction to reject screens. This time he does exactly that, and because the big is back and drop, he's got access to an elbow jumper. Here's another one where he looks to reject the screen, but Holiday does a great job of shutting off a drive. So he turns back to the side of the screen to use it, prompting a switch, but Davis makes the mistake of giving him an inch of room, to which he of course buries a triple. Switching actually ended up being the most used coverage against Steph in the pick and roll, especially come playoff time, but even that led to a ton of the same issues. For starters, if the switch was even a fraction of a second late, there was nothing the defense could do but hope he missed. And if the switch was on time, closing that space, that meant a big was now on an island, to which he'd showcase that same skill set as a ball handler and driver to get into the paint for easy points. Or he'd use those moves to sell the drive before stepping back to the 3-point line, pretty much getting whatever he wants in these one-on-one scenarios. When working in isolation, especially against slower-footed players, he makes the defense pick their poison, put pressure on the ball, and he's working his way to the basket for some inside scoring. Sag off to protect the paint, and he's stepping into one of his 40% pull-up threes. Neither's a good option. As a result, just like in pick and roll, his efficiency as an isolation scorer in 2016 was just absurd, landing above the 94th percentile in both points per game and points per possession. I should also emphasize that this one-on-one attack wasn't exclusive to big men. Here's one where he hunts for LeBron on a switch before doing the exact same thing to create a lane to the basket. So when it comes to the totality of his on-ball scoring, we're talking about one of the best. He has to be picked up as soon as he crosses half court, or he's stepping into a transition pull-up three. In the half court, he'll run pick and roll, where he's got counters for every type of coverage and can utilize all three levels depending on what the defense takes away. If they switch, he'll isolate the mismatch with top-tier effectiveness, having no shortage of ways to put the ball in the basket. With that said, you could make the argument that he was actually more dangerous without the ball. Remember when I said that he made a scorching 47% of his wide open threes, generating layup type of efficiency? Well, he shot even better off the catch, knocking down nearly 47.5% of his looks. And if you thought room for error was small when he had the ball, imagine if all he had to do was catch, square up, and shoot. It doesn't matter where his momentum's carrying him, what angle he catches the ball at, he can square and get a shot up before you can blink, which means that the defense has to be perfect. Most movement shooters have a preference, more comfortable shooting while moving to either their left or right, and that usually has a lot to do with their actual shooting motion. Steph's a rare case of being just as lethal while drifting in either direction. So within the Warriors offense, he'd just constantly be running around screens all over the court, set at every type of angle, until he found just a little cushion of space to do what he did best. Everything I talked about with the pick and roll coverage applies to these off-ball screens. If his defender tries to go under, he's shooting right over the top of them. If the defense goes to a switch, but it isn't done with perfection, he'll get a shot off before they can even react. And if the screen is defended well, resulting in a smothered look, well, sometimes that doesn't even matter. As a result, many guys will try to shoot the gap and beat him to the side of the screen. He had counters though, and instead of using the screen all the way through, he'd stop short to create a little bit more separation. Off-ball shooting is one thing, off-ball movement is a completely different category, and Steph just so happens to be arguably the best ever at both skills, which made him impossible to defend within the motion offense. Here it looks like the Warriors are about to set up their signature split action, only for Steph to reject the screen with a sharp backdoor cut on his way to a layup. Here's one where the action is actually defended really well. A timely switch denies Steph the ball, but that's not it. The guy never stops moving, and when he cuts back through, it isn't defended well, resulting in another layup. That constant movement wasn't just off of screens. Anytime he didn't have the ball, he was running around, hunting for space, which he typically found with ease. And in the same way, he'd use aggressive pressure to cut back door, he'd threaten cuts to create separation on the perimeter. Like I said, there's no room for error. One big staple of his game was the way he'd move after getting rid of the ball. High school coaches would be absolutely thrilled with the way he'd pass and immediately cut, but even more prominent were the plays where he'd kick the ball to a teammate only to relocate to a different spot on the three-point line, which really took advantage of inattentive defenders. I want you to watch Timofey Mozgov on this one. As Steph sets up the high pick and roll, Mozgov is up at the level of the screen, ready to meet him with aggressive coverage. Then when Steph gets rid of the ball, he drops back inside the arc like the threat is no longer there, only Steph immediately cuts back to the ball for a second use of the screen, this time with nobody to meet him on the other side. That non-stop movement also applies to what he'll do after catching the ball. If he flies off a screen and doesn't have a three right away, he's putting the ball on the floor and attacking, to which the defense is right back to dealing with his on-ball game. This is so deadly because his level of shooting pretty much guarantees that he'll draw the most aggressive closeouts. So sometimes all it takes is a simple head fake to create an island of space. Then there's nothing he can't do to take advantage of that space. Maybe he'll step into a pull-up three somewhere else along the perimeter. Maybe he'll make an instant decision to drive, where he can show off some more of that otherworldly touch as a finisher. Basically what I'm getting at is the fact that no matter what a defense does, he's probably gonna generate a high efficiency shot, which was the unfortunate reality of facing Golden State during those years. His 2016 season doesn't even seem real. His efficiency was about 13% ahead of the league's average while scoring over 30 points a game. We've never seen anything like it and probably won't ever see anything like it again. But even the surrounding years are just absurd. In 2015, he was more than 10% ahead of average, in 2018 almost 12%, and in his highest volume scoring season ever, he remained close to 9%. When you talk about Steph, it's important to recognize that he's not only the best shooter ever, but arguably the most efficient scorer ever. The way he generates layup type efficiency as soon as he crosses half court both with and without the ball completely breaks the defense wide open, making him truly impossible to guard. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to drop a like, subscribe, and turn my post notifications on to be first on more content. If you're interested in my more in-depth research, make sure to check out my website and social media profiles. You can find those links in the description. Feel free to let me know down in the comments what you think of Steph. As always, I hope you all have a great day, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.